Okay, this is my son's iPod. It's the fifth generation. It's not working, and presume that the battery is dead. I actually put a post on Facebook to my friends trying to figure out where I can get some solder since the local Radio Shack had closed, and got that information. But one of my friends texted me later asking me if I can videotape the repair job and explain a little bit how you go about taking apart an iPod and replacing the battery. Unfortunately, I got to that text a little bit later, so I had already opened the iPod, and I pretty much on this end pried it open. You can actually get an X-Acto knife. There are a number of tools you can use, but I found an X-Acto knife with a square head to be better in getting in there and prying it open. There are a couple of things you have to watch out for. First, there's some adhesive here in this location and under here, and that's where you really want to start prying it open. And when you start prying it open, you have to slip something under there, and so it gives you a little bit leverage so you can get the X-Acto knife point in there and continue to pry it open, not unlike you would do to other devices. You pry it open on this side and you go on this side, and there are a couple of tabs that hold it into place, and of course you would you know, be careful and pull those apart, and it'll just snap right up out of place. I also got the battery kit. I was asked where did I get a battery, and I got the battery from iFixit. I purchased this kit from Radio Shack. From Amazon. I got the solder from Radio Shack, but I got the kit from Amazon. I purchased this thinking I would need it and it would be thin enough to pry it open, but it was a rather useless purchase. It was about $2, so I keep it for other projects. But the X-Acto knife thinner blades what you need to really get inside. Comes with a battery, comes some spacers. These came out a lot handier than I expected. If you play the guitar, you might have some of these picks to put around the device, kind of keep the edge open while you continue to pry it. And they give you a suction cup, and you apply that to the glass while you're pulling it open. I didn't use this at all, so I thought that was useless. And it comes with a small screwdriver and also a pry bar. Once you can't use this really to start the opening process. It's after it's open, then you can pretty much wedge it in between and pretty much move it open from side to side and stick in these guitar picks in between the screen and the body of the device to do that. If you do use the X-Acto knife to pry this open, be careful. Do use some safety glasses, because the X-Acto knife blade, if you hit it, it might bend, or you might chip the screen, which might cause a piece of glass to fly into your eye. So use safety glasses. Okay, I'll show you what it looks like inside once I've opened it. The adhesive is sticky again. Okay, oh, got it upside down. Hold on. Turn it around, and this is what it looks like inside. You don't want to push the top all the way, because you have a connection at the top over there which connects the screen. So you leave it at this, and now I can move these guitar picks out of the way. Sorry, I'm holding the phone while talking, so it's difficult. The adhesive is very strong, and I can point them out to you. You should also have an anti-static strap around your wrist to prevent you from destroying the device with an electrostatic discharge. If you don't have one, do ground yourself somehow before starting. These are the adhesive pad right here where my thumb is, and on the other side, which you start prying it up from. Next, what I'm going to do is take that small screwdriver that came from the kit and take out all these screws. I'm going to get a bowl to put the screws in, because you definitely don't want to lose any of them. And then take this shield off, and the battery should be under there, and we'll go from there. I'm going to turn this off so I can get going. Here I have the paper bowl which I'm going to put the screws in. I've also, if you notice, I've put a little bit of painter's tape on here. The screws are very tiny, so I want them to stick. If I happen to knock over this bowl, it'll be chances are very little I'll ever find all the screws again. And there are plenty of them to take out. So I put the painter's tape over here, and I'll put the screws on, and I'll put them in the order in which with the right orientation as I take them out. I'm pretty sure the screws are the exact same size, but I don't want to take the chance and having one that's a tiny bit longer and put it in the wrong place and short circuit the iPod. Okay, there looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws to remove. And I don't know if you can see this that well, whoops, but I will pick it up and show you the location of these screws. They are, you can see them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the other side. I'm going to put the camera down a little bit and just unscrew them. I don't have a convenient place to hold it. Let me see if I can hold it up somehow, and you can see me taking out the screws. Otherwise, we'll just skip that part. It's just removing screws. Okay. I also have a magnifying glass here so I can look down and see these screws because they're very small. And the Apple Store is pretty gracious because if here's the screw over here on the tip of the screwdriver. If you choose not to repair it yourself, of course, you could always go to the Apple Store, and they actually offer the $100 off their current 5th generation iPods. So you'd pay $149 or so for a new one, and of course plus tax. Can't forget Uncle Sam. But I enjoy electronics. Some people doing work like this is very frustrating, but I actually find it relaxing, and I miss it a lot from my co-op days, and of course my junior engineer days. Whoops, this fell down. I have 3 more screws to take out, and this screwdriver is magnetic, so it's very nice and handy putting the screws down onto that carpenter tape. That's 5, 1 more screw to go. Let me see, there might be some on, oh, there are actually 2 more screws up here which I have to take out, so that there are 8 screws, not 6 as I stated. I didn't see those, and of course I have the magnifying glass now, and it becomes a lot more visible. And here's my magnifying glass up here. It may not be visible to the screen. So I've taken out the 6. Now there are 2 more up here. And you really have to enjoy the work. I'm not so sure it's worth it for most people to buy a soldering iron, buying the solder, buying the wick, buying, if you get a magnifying glass, buying that, and to actually do this work. I had most of my tools, so it wasn't a big issue with me. And of course I enjoy the work. There's a little bit of adhesive also holding that down, so I have to pry it a little bit to get the cover off. And there are some areas where it clips together. Of course, when you take this apart, you definitely want to be able to remember the orientation. This one doesn't look like it's hard to put back, but it's not symmetric. Try to get under there and pull this up. Maybe I'll use this after all, this tool. To unclip it. Oh, actually I see a couple more places for screws. 1 and 2, that's why it's not coming out. I'll take those out. Thought I lost that screw. There are 4 more. No, maybe not 4 more, 3 more. We'll see. That one, yeah, 4 more rather. One right here. I just noticed my hands blocking the area, but I don't have a camera crew. Take that one out. And it should come up now. Okay, one more thing to do, and I'll take this camera from this device so you can take a look. Camera, it's actually my iPhone. See the home button over here? I'm gonna point that out. It's glued in, so I'm gonna go get my tweezers and actually pry that open because it's actually on the shield. So I'm gonna pry this open a little bit with the X-Acto knife and then pull it away. Otherwise I won't be able to pull the shield. That's something I'm glad I saw with this magnifying glass because it's hard to see. It's kind of sticky, so I'm sure there's adhesive all over it, holding it down, and I will do that and come right back with how I managed to get it out. Just wanted to show this, trying to figure out how to remove this, but I'm actually using the blade of my X-Acto knife, the square one. Notice the chip there. Like I said before, safety glasses are important. Not just your regular glasses if you wear glasses, but safety glasses that go around your entire eyes, both of your eyes, obviously, and not just your glasses, which a piece of metal can come out and, of course, get around your glasses, either on the bottom or the top or the sides, and get into your eye. I'm actually going to pry this open like this, pry this off. It has some adhesive on it. It's electronics is over. Let me see if I can point to that. On this end, the cable anyway, but this is the home button, so I'm going to have to pull this up, and it's just looks like it's just stuck on with adhesive, and then carefully use a pair of tweezers and lift it up. I'm holding the iPhone videotaping this, so it's going to be hard for me to do it while you watch, so I'm going to turn it off and get it done, then let you know how successful or not I was. By the way, these are the screws. Put them on the painter's tape, that way they're not going anywhere. And of course, when I need them, they're in the proper sequence, so I know exactly which screw goes in which hole. Okay, I lifted up. I use the X-Acto knife blade here, and I pulled it up. Once I got a corner pulled up, then I turned the blade around and used the dull end to lift it up, because of course I don't want to cut the circuitry and the switch off. But it's up now. It does have adhesive on it, but as you can see, you can pull it up and then pull out the shield. Okay, there we go. Put this in. It's not symmetric, so I'm not too worried about the orientation, but there's lithium-ion battery here. Now we're at the battery. Let's see what we have here. Okay. up here it looks like we have some kind of a shielding or a tape, which I'm gonna have to pull up, and then I can obviously see the, let me get something to point with. And I can obviously see the connector to the battery going in this direction, so I'm assuming it's plugged in underneath this, either, it looks like tape, but it could be shielding. And once I lift that up, probably use the same technique with the X-Acto knife, lift it up and go from there. I will start that now. Okay, wish I had a better way to hold this iPhone while I do this video. There we go. I lift it up here. It looks like just a piece of tape. Of course, I'm gonna put that aside because I'm gonna use it again. The kit does not come with a piece of tape. And what do we have now? Looks like we have another piece of tape. Here's where the battery is connected. It's soldered on, and looks like there's another piece of tape on. I have to take that off and then get to the solder, and then we'll start desoldering and replacing the battery. Okay, I've lifted up the edge of this tape over here. I'm going to try to pull it up with my finger, but because I could not find my tweezers, but you should use tweezers if you have them. I have to find. Almost there. It's pulling up also part of the battery harness, so I want to be careful and not rip it out of the area, because that, I'm sure it's soldered. Yeah. Well, that piece of tape looks like that. I managed to rip that piece of tape, but it's okay. I can see the battery connection. Sorry about the shaky camera, but so many hands anyone has. Okay, now I got the tape off. Put it here, use it again. It's a bit ripped, but it'll do. Now I have access to the solder point. Now this is going to be the most delicate part of the operations. Of course, if you read the battery, it says, potential for fire or burning. Do not disassemble, puncture, crush, heat, or burn. My more concerns about heating. When you heat the contact, you're going to heat it through the wires into the battery, but it should be okay in this particular area. First, what I'm going to do is take my soldering iron and actually put some solder on these pads, on these connection pads. Then when I do that, I will use solder wick. I don't know if you're familiar with solder wick, but or solder braid, which allows the solder to wick, or let me see if I can get that, or go on to this braid and or come off the circuit board. And of course, that's what you want to do, get the solder off so you can pull the connection out. Okay, I'm gonna try to, I don't know if I can show this, I'm gonna try to hook up the phone such that I can see the operation here, but I haven't had luck on it yet. I'll try it again. Okay, all of that was the easy part. Now we're going to approach the hard part, and that is, of course, using a soldering iron and some solder. This is where you have to really be careful. You don't want to heat the components, the contact area too much, because if you do, you might damage additional components. Also, before I started all this, I took a good look at the connector. That's where the powers connector or data connector on this iPod, because you might think it's the battery, but when you're diagnosing a problem, you have to actually start from the power. It would not power on, so that was this made symptom. But of course, you have to determine um, whether the connector is bad or the wire that you're using to power it up is bad. So first I had to do was not replace, but use a different wire to make sure it was correct, and then use that same wire to power something else on and make sure that was all correct. And of course, you could have a bad connector at the end of the iPod. So I took a magnifying glass, took a look at that, and it looked okay. So I'm fairly confident that that connector is fine, but we'll know soon. Here I'm going to just put a little bit of solder on the tip of the iron. And this is rosin flux core solder. If you do not have flux core solder, you must get some flux to put on these contact areas. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad solder, and that's not good, because you'll have perhaps intermittent connection or no connection at all after doing all this work. But everything should be tested. So I'm going to heat up this area and put down my solder just a little bit, and I clean it frequently. You can hear it. That's actually a sponge I've been moistened. I'll show that to you if you haven't done this before. I'm sure if you attempted this, you've done this type of work before. Soldering station with the sponge to clean the tip. Just put it into this moistened sponge, and you clean the solder off. Okay, go to next connection point. And as soon as you see the solder flow, remove the heat from the joint. Otherwise, you might damage the components here. Okay. Now that that's done, believe it or not, now we have to remove the solder we just put in. The reason why you want to put in solder, because it gives you a sufficient amount of solder to start wicking, and I'll show you that in a little while with the solder wick. Okay, desoldering time. Using the solder wick, I found my tweezers, so that should help. Pulling it up. As you can see, the solder wicks into the solder braid. If you're doing this for the first time, watch your fingers. The heat really travels up the solder braid. That didn't look like it came out cleanly, so I have to be careful. Let me see if I can lift this up. Okay. Okay, got one off. Go to the next one. Sorry about the camera shake, but it's really in my way. Every once in a while you have to cut the solder braid so you have a new piece in the front to work with at the point. Go on to the next one now. Okay. Just heat it up a bit to get any leftover solder out while I lift up. You have to be really careful here. You don't want to lift up the solder pad on the circuit board here. Got the second one out. Because if you lift up the pad, then you'll have no place to connect. Cut another piece off the solder braid. Let's see. One more to go. Okay, that's about it. There we go. Got it. Now there's one more thing to do, and that is to get this area cleaned up very well. I'm going to cut the solder wick again. I just want to be able to touch up the area, make it clean. Make sure you get any pieces of solder out so you don't have a short circuit inside. Okay, now I'm going to remove the battery, the old battery. And it's glued in. A little bit of prying, this pry bar. Prying it from all sides. You can hear it coming off the adhesive. You could use a little bit of heat if you have a temperature control soldering iron. I mean a heat gun, not a soldering iron, to soften the adhesive to be able to take some some of these off, but it's done here. Okay. One thing I did notice, this is the battery I just replaced. Look at the polarity. Plus on this side, minus on this side. And from iFixit, I got a battery that has negative on this side, on the left side, and positive on the right side. So I have to be careful on how I connect this to make sure I get the polarities correct. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. So looking at these joints, and I decided to apply a little bit of solder to them because I don't like the way they look. It looks kind of dull, and it should be relatively shiny. So just a hair of a solder. Okay. Right there. Now what I'm going to do is just take that solder off. We don't want a lump there, but I want to be able to take it off quickly. It's a little bit better. Okay, a little bit more in this one. It's hard to see. Okay, not the best, but it's gonna do for now. Here's the new battery. I put it into place. I've decided, at least I'm hoping, since this is an iPod 5th generation battery replacement, whoever manufactures this battery has taken into account the polarity, because you really need to bend this connection point over here to be able to solder it back in place. If they didn't take that to account, it would cause a bit of a problem. I'm gonna have to move this away so I can just get the battery in place. Okay, put the battery in place. Now, make sure it's aligned properly with the soldering pads. Need a little bit more light here. That looks good. I'm going to put a little bit more solder on those pads. Apply a little bit of heat. Okay, that looks pretty good. If you have some alcohol, rubbing alcohol, you might put some on a Q-tip and brush away any flux from that area. And of course the alcohol will evaporate very quickly. That's what I'm going to do now, just to make sure it's a clean area, you don't have any short circuits. Okay, here's my Q-tip. What I'm going to do first of all is remove some of this cotton, because you're going to get pieces of cotton stuck in part of your circuit. And I'm just going to put it my finger and just roll it in, make it a small amount of cotton, and then of course I'll dip it in alcohol. Whoops, just spilled a little bit of it. Okay, and I'm going to clean up that joint right here. Don't leave too much alcohol in it, but it, like I said, it evaporates very quickly. That's much cleaner. You can see the yellow mark on the Q-tip. That's from the flux. That comes from the core of the solder. Just going to clean it up nice and clean, and I can proceed. Okay, it's pretty much lined up. You have to make sure it's really fairly well lined up, and I'm just blowing on it because I don't feel like going to the basement to get my heat gun, but alcohol evaporates quickly, so I'm not going to worry too much about it at this point. I'm going to put the pad down, take a good look at it, make sure it's a proper place, and it looks good. We're ready to solder it back into place. But before I solder it back into place, I like to apply a little bit of alcohol on top of this. And the reason because I had my fingers all over it, and I want any oils that could have come from my finger onto the connection point off. You want to make sure you have a good solder joint. This is the critical part. If you have a bad solder joint, it could cause it to overheat depending upon the nature of the problem, or intermittent circuit. All of it is obviously not desirable. Now I'm going to solder this back into place. I like to put a little bit of solder on the tip of the soldering iron so I can get a little bit better of flow. Then turn it. Okay, make sure it's down. You don't want to solder without making a connection. These holes, they're very important. The little tiny holes at the top, because the solder is going to pass through there and connect to the, make a connection to the solder beneath through these holes. So take care that the solder gets in there as best you can. Okay. And of course there's solder on the bottom, so that will help on that path too. And solder is used as more of a clamp than an adhesive. You don't usually want to put solder, well, if you're going to solder two wires together, you wrap the wire around each other, then you solder over that, which clamps it together more. So it's used more of a clamp than an adhesive, which you would put between wires or between circuit boards. A lot of people make that mistake. Just going to heat it up a little bit while it's down. And the joints, like, they're really nice and shiny, so I'm hoping for the best at this point. What I'm going to do next is get my cord and power it in, make sure it's working before putting it back together. Hopefully that'll fix it. Okay, this is the big test. I just plugged it in, and you have the Apple logo come up on the screen, so that's great. Okay, after having had a successful power-up test, it's time to put it back together. Of course, you try to do everything in reverse. Start off with this little piece of insulation tape that I ripped part of it off, but what can you do? Put it right here, and the trick is to cover up the solder joints. Okay, that's the main important part, that you have solder joints covered. Okay, and then the other piece, oh, stuck to the table now. I have to pull it off the table. It's very good adhesive. There it is. I have to pull it off somehow. Gotta get the video out of my way so I can. Okay, I got it off the table. That was pretty hard. You take this off, just stick it on an edge. It somehow got flattened on the table, and it was hard to get off. And this was a piece of shielding. It has what probably is aluminum foil in the back of this tape, and the foil will come off if you try to pry it off of the table. So when you take this off, make sure you don't get it stuck on the table. Okay, there we go. That was the edge that I started prying from. Make sure it's there. By the way, you notice that every once in a while this is the camera that comes out. If it does come out, make sure you pop it into place before you put the cover on. But for now, I'm going to just go ahead and continue to put it back together. Okay, putting this shielding plate back together. Make sure that you get the home button. The right place. Remember, it has fairly strong adhesive, so be careful. Okay, now you go around and make sure you get to pop into place. It has some clips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips. And of course, align the with the screw holes before you pop it into place all the way. Okay, now I'll get my bowl with the painter's tape, the screws, moving the camera a little bit. Okay, putting the first one in up here. It's not aligning, so I'm going to go to this one and put it down. There it goes. They're the same. They look like they're all the same size. Okay, notice I'm not tightening them all the way. I just want that shield to align properly first before I put apply some torque. do use the painter's tape to hold these screws in place, or to place them on it. They are tiny, and if they fall to the floor, you might not find them all again. And this magnetic screwdriver is the lifesaver, because you can't really hold these screws with 2 fingers and then try to screw it back into place. Three more screws to go. Last one. Oh, right here. I missed this one right over here. The screws look like they're all the same size, so I'm not concerned anymore. But before taking it off, I was a bit concerned that they might be different size. I'm going to go around and tighten them from one side to another a little bit. Apply a little bit of torque. You certainly don't want the screws to come off. And short circuit something in this area. But they're very small, so you want to limit the amount of torque you put on them. One more time around. Firm. Okay, now I'm going to put the home button back. Try to get it back, line it up. There's a hole over here and it lines up with this. Make sure you line it up properly so you don't have any home button problems. I'm sure the accuracy doesn't have to be perfect, but that looks good. Okay, I like to push this down a little bit, make sure it stays in place. Okay, double check, make sure I have everything in place. Okay, now put the camera back. Keeps coming out, even I didn't take it out, it keeps coming out by itself. Okay, and I'm gonna look where the tabs are. tabs so I can push them back into place, all these tabs all the way around. And on the bottom we have the adhesive here and here. So those are the areas you want to apply a little bit of pressure to. Be careful, you don't want to break it after doing that work. Okay. Having a little bit of problems. I'm going to double check, make sure I'm not squeezing anything. I'm just going to put it all the way down. That looks better. Looks like it's seating better. There we go. There it goes. And of course, remember, if you have a heat gun and you can control the temperature, don't go out and get the heat gun with one temperature setting for removing paint or anything and try to heat this area. But if you have one that you can control the temperature, start off low temperature and heat it up a little bit. I don't think it's a big concern because this iPod is going to have a case around it, but you want to make sure that the screen doesn't pop out. Look around, make sure that the spacing is even to know that it's clipped back into place. And of course, right up here is the most important part. Make absolutely sure it's down because it actually have to go under the lip and around. And we're done. Plug it in again and make sure it's charging, and my son's going to be a happy camper. There it goes. It even turned itself on. Must have pressed the button. Slide to unlock. Of course, I won't do it now. I don't know my son's code, so it's not going to happen. Plus, I have to charge it. Looks good. Job done. Complete. Successful. Okay. I don't know what the password is, so I have to call my son. He's not home and figure out what the password is just to give it a final test. But when he gets home, it'll be fully charged, and I'm sure he'll be very happy to see his favorite toy device is working. Of course, usually when I fix something, people ask me, was it worth it? Do you want to just buy a new one? My answer to that is always two. Usually, instead of paying someone to do what I do it myself. That's the money I earned. I know I had a dryer that broke, and Sears wanted $600 to repair it, and I bought the parts and was able to do it. I mean, less than $100, and probably, I don't know, I don't remember exactly how long it took me, an hour and a half or so to get it done. This was less than an hour to take apart and put back together. I had to wait a little bit for the battery, of course, to come in the mail because I bought it on Amazon. But other than that, a new one would cost $249. If I gave Apple this one, it would be $249 if you gave this, if you bought a new one, a 5th generation anyway. If I took this back to Apple, they'll take $100 off. That'll be $149. So I paid about $14 for the battery, and of course I didn't have any solder, so I bought solder, but I can use that elsewhere, and all the other equipment I already had. So probably I'd say $20 or something like that to repair this, and I think it was less than an hour. So for me anyway, it's worth doing. And the most important part is I enjoy working, fixing things, so that's an added bonus. Money savings and the fact that I love this type of work. It's good for me. Okay, thank you for watching.